Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Nomadic Overland. In this episode, I'm going to go over how to build a custom rear bumper. I'm going to do a steel bumper to replace the stock one out of plate steel, and I'm also going to do a swing away for this bumper. I will be honest, I don't necessarily want a swing away on the truck, but right now the spare tire, I do need a spare, so I have been without a spare for a while. But essentially it's too big to put it vertically in the bed area under the rack I have for the tent and set it upright. I can lay it down, but then I lose a ton of storage space in there. And I also can't fit it underneath with the way the truck is set up right now in the stock area. So basically, it's either mount on top, which I also don't want to do because that's way too much weight up top, or do a swing way. So I do want to also build a mountain bike rack on there as well. So I'm going to do a swing away rear tire rack. I actually have the gas mounted in the bed, so I'm not going to do the gas cans like I was originally planning, but I will do a mountain bike rack on there. So I'm going to take you through the initial prep, take off the stock bumper, what goes into building it, and including the swing away as well. So I already have some parts for that, so I'll take you through that as well. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy the build. Hopefully this is a better version of what I did for the front bumper, in which I didn't plan very well. So this time I'm going to try to cover it in a lot more detail. All right, well, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully this inspires you to take on a challenge and project like this as well. Thanks. All right, so let's go over the parts that I'm going to use. Well, first off, I was going to use this type of closure system to hold the bumper in place, but I actually changed my mind, so we're just going to eliminate that right off the bat. Instead, I decided to go with this super stout solid steel handle with a spring-loaded safety pin. But this is a nice 3/8 inch thick, looks like mild steel. It's cleaned up like it's stainless, but I think it's actually mild steel plate. Then we also have the spindle system. I'm just going to go with this single mounting point. So basically I'm going to weld it top and bottom here. But we have this kit, and essentially what it comes with is we have the spindle itself here. We have some tapered roller bearings. Down here we have a seal, and it has a double grease seal basically that fits this perfectly. This is the barrel that everything will essentially weld to. So if you can see in here, hopefully that focuses pretty well. But basically we have the tapered roller bearing races in there. So essentially that will go on here and sit on that bearing. We have another tapered bearing for the top that will go in here, a flat washer, and then we have a castle nut that you apply some initial tension to preload the bearings. And then of course upon final assembly we have our cotter pin and the stamped steel cap that goes on here. So basically we'll go ahead and figure out how this is going to mount. Then when it's all ready, we'll pack this full of grease, clamp it down, get this on there. But there's a lot of steps to do before that. Basically we need to mock up the bumper, figure out how this is going to fit into play, and then figure out what the arm is going to look like that comes off of this rotating piece here. And yeah, that's how it's going to go. And then for the actual steel for the bumper, I have a bunch of this 6 inches wide, 1/8 inch thick flat bar, essentially. I also have some 4 inch wide 3/16. So depending on where it is in the bumper, we're going to use various thicknesses. I also have some other 3/16. I have some quarter rounds, so we're going to figure out what the bumper is made out of. But the general shape of it is going to be this 1/8 inch flat bar. All right, you can see the stock bumper is off now, and the way to take it off is there are 4 bolts that hold it on. We have 2 here, 1 here, which is where this one is where the rear leaf spring perch is, and then 1 down here. This one goes through the trailer hitch mount, basically, or the sides where the tow hitch is, and so it comes up from the tow hitch, and then these 2 are in the side. They're all pretty easy because there's nuts welded on, so you just have to get to them. I used a 1/2 inch not torque wrench, half-inch impact for all of them, and was able to knock them off. And it's the same on the other side as well. The only difference is this one the nut isn't welded on, so you just need to put a crescent wrench on one side. It comes off plenty easy though. Then you just slide the bumper out, and what you'll want to do is disconnect this wire from the chassis, which is the license plate lights, and then on the truck itself you want to disconnect this plug here, which is for the trailer hitch lights. That should be it, and that will basically leave you with this, which is the trailer hitch and the back of the truck. So far I have removed the stock rear bumper and the rear tow hitch. So what I've decided to do is I am going to replace the tow hitch with a custom one of my own design to get it higher up, a little bit higher clearance. But it basically bolts on under here. There's 3 bolts underneath on that rear frame rail, and it'll pull back. So what I've done so far is I've started with what's going to be my top plate, and I basically figured out what the contour is. So those contours match up here with this little side, the back of the bedside basically, and measured the width and everything. And what I did is I used the stock bumper to make this cardboard template, and then I decided how far in under the tailgate the bumper should go, and that's where I made my mark. I also figured out that I wanted basically 4 inches here sticking out past the rear of the tailgate. So essentially what that's going to be is if you were to look straight down, you would have 4 inches sticking out past the tailgate right there. That's where we're at so far. So basically I need to cut this out and prop it in place. I also am going to make the mounts for what will be the rear tow bar. One other thing I did is I took the cap for the stock wheels and basically figured out which holes in this plate are going to be needed for this, and all the ones that are not going to be needed have been circled, and I'm going to plug fill them basically. So I'll be left with these top 2 holes here and these bottom 2, and that matches up with the 4 lug nuts that they gave me to put in that. And so basically when the spare tires on, it'll just be held on by the 4 lug nuts, not all 6. So I'm going to go ahead and get those filled as well, and start figuring out how to mock up everything. Moving on with the bumper build, I'm mocking up the frame pieces that are going to serve as the new tow hitch. So it uses all 3 of the stock bolts and is more substantial than the original. I think it was a class 4, but yeah, they're more substantial than that. So basically what I've had to do is add a little notch there. So you can see on this one actually there's a short notch on that side and a longer one, and basically what that is doing is it's going around this bracket here. And then once I get the trailer hitch piece that I ordered, basically what's going to happen is I'm going to notch this one with a 2-inch notch. I think it's a 2x2 thick wall tube. So this one is going to be notched. It's going to come in here, and so it's going to sit in that notch and be welded all the way around with a little bit here and here, and then fully welded as much as I can inside here. So yeah, that should give it some good support sitting in here, and basically welded on 2 fronts. And that bar is basically, it's a 42-inch tube, so it's going to come across, of course, as you would expect, all the way over. And that should sit out about where the rear bumper will be. So you can see that matches up right there, depending on, or it matches up with the side of the bed basically. And then with the additional length of the trailer hitch, that's going to come out a little bit, and it should match up pretty well with where the bumper will be here. Now that I have everything mocked up for the frame mounts for the tow bar, I went ahead and center punched all my holes. I took some measurements so that I can replicate these in the future. All the holes are center punched. I'm going to drill them out. This is probably like a 5/8 hole or so. But I'll measure that out, drill them out, and then get these mounted to the car. And then I'm going to start mocking up the top part of the bumper, because basically it's going to mount off the top of here, and then we can start developing the rest of the bumper. So the final stage in the process here is I made some cut lines. I actually already cut the other side, and it's cut up this way. So what that's going to do is it's going to add a relief, so that way we can access the bolts in the top. So we'll be able to come in from the bottom and get to the 3 bolts that mount this here. The outer part of this, where the tube is going to mount, is going to remain solid. So basically I'm keeping it solid as far down as possible. And then this little angle is just to make sure, if I'm off-roading or whatever, it's just a little bit less likely to get caught on something. But it's pretty high up. Just a similar cut like this was in there for the stock component. And this actually isn't going to make too big of a difference, because this is the end. We don't need the beam strength all the way back here necessarily. It's more needed, as we get further out, and this is kind of extended past the frame of the truck. All right, so both of the, tow bar frame rail pieces are cut out. Now just time to hit them with the flap wheel or something to get off these super sharp edges and just kind of round things out a little bit. Make sure I don't cut myself later on. All right, so at this time I have the trailer hitch kind of frame mounts on each side. And now I'm trying to figure out the height that I'm gonna make the top plate for the rear bumper. So basically I'm just using some 1-inch tube on here. And what I wanna see is if I open the tailgate, how much clearance I have. So I'm gonna have an 1/8 inch plate on there. So it looks like there should be plenty of clearance, which is nice, and not too much. So I think this is the height I'm gonna go with. So I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting up the top plate like I showed you earlier. So we have the initial contours laid out for the edge of the bumper. So the mount for the actual swing arm is going to lay right here. So for aesthetics, I would love to cut this a little bit more, but realistically I want to leave as much material out here at the edge of the bumper as possible. So once again, this is going to contour to the bed, then we have an angle here, and then a 45 coming this way. In the middle I have a 19-inch cutout, so that includes a 12-inch license plate in here. And then on one side of that will be the power for a trailer. And on the other side, it'll just be a blank space, the same distance that I'm going to allow for that trailer. And then some 45s. And then, of course, on the other side, we have a similar contour. So what I'm going to do now is cut that out. And what's going to happen is I basically need to then cut 6-inch plate, so more of this 6-inch stuff, the same lengths as all of this. So I need a 19-inch piece, like a 2 1/4 or so inch piece, or 2 of those, a piece that's this big and a piece that's this big, and those are all going to hang down. And so basically once I do all that, I will have the top of the bumper, and then I'll have the first face that goes down.